I'm Frances Colton, 32 years old. 3 months in a coma, and I woke up to an empty hospital room with a two-word note from my billionaire father. We stopped paying. The machines keeping me alive had been funded by strangers while my family, worth $2.8 billion, celebrated their freedom from the daughter who'd secretly built 40% of their empire. My stepmother had already divided my belongings. My half-brother had claimed my office. My father had signed papers declaring me mentally incompetent. They thought a car accident had solved their 15-year problem of the unwanted daughter who knew too much, worked too hard, and reminded them of the brilliant woman they'd tried to erase. What they didn't know was that my mother had left me more than memories. She'd left me the proof, the power, and the legal ammunition to expose every lie they'd built their fortune on. Before we dive into how I turned their abandonment into their downfall, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. This is the story of how the worst betrayal of my life became their most expensive mistake. The first thing I noticed wasn't the pain. It was the silence. Hospital rooms are never truly quiet. There's always the steady beep of monitors, the shuffle of nurses in the hallway, the distant murmur of visitors. But as consciousness crept back into my body that October morning, the silence felt deliberate, personal. My eyes struggled to focus on the stark white ceiling tiles. Mass General Hospital. I recognized the pattern from my mother's final days here 15 years ago. Back then, our room had been filled with flowers, cards, and rotating shifts of family members. Richard had even hired a private nurse to ensure she was never alone. Now, a single folded piece of paper sat on the bedside table where flowers should have been. "Miss Colton?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening. "You're awake. I need to call Dr. Martinez immediately." "How long?" My voice came out as a rasp. "3 months, Miss Colton. You've been in a coma for 3 months." She hesitated at the door. "I'm so sorry, but I have to ask, is there anyone we should call? Your emergency contact?" "My father, Richard Colton." Her face shifted uncomfortably. "He's the one who left the note. 2 weeks ago, he came in person to sign the papers, said the family would no longer be covering your medical expenses." I reached for the paper with trembling fingers. Richard's handwriting was as precise as his business contracts. "We stopped paying. Good luck. R.C." In 3 months, not one member of my family had visited. Not Richard, not my stepmother Victoria, not even Derek, the half-brother I'd helped through Harvard Business School. The nurse touched my shoulder gently. "There's someone here to see you, though. He's been waiting in the lobby every day for 2 weeks." Marcus Sterling walked in like he was entering a boardroom, not a hospital room. At 45, my mother's former legal counsel still carried himself with the quiet authority that made Fortune 500 CEOs nervous. Behind him followed a man I didn't recognize. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Francis." Marcus's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine relief. "Thank God you're awake." "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Protecting your interests, as I promised your mother I would." He set his briefcase on the visitor's chair. "This is James Harrison. You might not remember him, but he remembers you." The stranger stepped forward. "CEO of Goldman Sachs. You've been advising us remotely for 5 years, though your family never knew." My head was spinning, still foggy from the coma. "I don't understand. Richard stopped paying my medical bills. Why are you—" "Because your father just made the most expensive mistake of his life," Marcus interrupted, a grim smile playing at his lips. "He forgot who actually owns the majority of your mother's trust fund. And more importantly, he forgot what happens when someone abandons a beneficiary during a medical emergency." James Harrison pulled out his phone. "The board meeting is in 72 hours. Your father plans to announce a complete family restructuring, essentially writing you out of everything. He's telling investors you're mentally incompetent due to the accident." "But there's something Richard doesn't know." Marcus opened his briefcase. revealing a thick folder marked with my mother's maiden name, Elizabeth Smith. Your mother didn't just leave you money, Francis. She left you a fully executed succession plan, one that activated the moment your father signed those papers abandoning you. What kind of succession plan? Marcus's smile widened. The kind that's about to make you the most powerful person in that boardroom. 15 years. That's how long I'd been the family ghost. Visible enough to be useful, invisible enough to be forgotten. It started the day my mother died. I was 17, standing in Richard's study while Victoria measured the windows for new curtains before we'd even held the funeral. The unofficial foster daughter, she'd called me at the reception, her manicured hand on my shoulder like a brand. Richard's little charity case from his first marriage. The truth was simpler and crueler. I was the reminder of the woman Richard had actually loved. While Derek got the corner office at 25, I worked from a converted supply closet. While he attended board meetings as the future of Colton Industries, I ghost-wrote the proposals that landed our biggest contracts. The Meridian acquisition? My analysis. The Shanghai expansion? My negotiations, conducted at 3 a.m. from my apartment while Derek took credit at the morning presentations. You should be grateful, Victoria reminded me every Christmas, usually after several glasses of wine. Not many girls with your background get these opportunities. My background. The daughter of Elizabeth Smith, the brilliant CFO who'd built Colton Industries from a regional firm into a national powerhouse before cancer took her at 39. The woman whose financial genius Richard had married, whose strategies he still used, whose daughter he couldn't bear to look at because I had her eyes. But there were things about my mother Victoria never knew, things Richard never bothered to investigate, like the late-night meetings with Marcus Sterling, the sealed documents in safety deposit boxes across the city, the quiet transfers of authority that happened while everyone focused on the visible empire. Your mother knew this day would come, Marcus had told me 5 years ago. She just didn't know what form it would take. Now, abandoned in a hospital bed with a 2-word dismissal, I finally understood what she'd been preparing me for. Your mother was never just the CFO, Marcus said, pulling out a document that made my breath catch. Elizabeth Smith was the majority shareholder of the original holding company that became Colton Industries. The papers were dated 2001, 3 years before she married Richard. Back when he was struggling to keep his father's failing logistics company afloat. The signatures were clear. Elizabeth Smith, 65% owner. Richard Colton, 35% owner. But the company records show Richard as founder. A convenient revision after your mother's death, James Harrison interjected. One that worked because Elizabeth kept her ownership through a trust structure. She wanted Richard to be the face of the company, but she never gave up control. Marcus handed me another document. This one was newer, dated just 5 years ago. Before the cancer progressed, your mother established the Elizabeth Smith Revocable Trust with $850 million in assets. But here's what Richard never knew. She changed the terms in 2020. The trust becomes irrevocable and transfers to you under specific conditions. What conditions? Abandonment during medical incapacity. Marcus's eyes gleamed. The moment Richard signed those papers refusing to pay your medical bills, he triggered the transfer. As of 2 weeks ago, you don't just inherit the money. You inherit her voting rights, her board positions, and this. He pulled out a small plastic card. A platinum-level security badge for Colton Industries, with my photo and an authorization level I'd never seen before. Executive override. Your mother had this made 5 years ago. It's been sitting in my safe, waiting. This badge gives you access to everything, every document, every system, every room in the building, including the executive boardroom. I stared at the badge. She planned all this? She knew Richard's nature, Marcus said softly. She just made sure that when he showed it, you'd be ready. 72 hours, James Harrison said, checking his phone. The annual shareholders meeting is this Thursday at the Ritz-Carlton. 2,000 investors, international media, and your father's grand announcement about the company's future leadership. Marcus pulled up the agenda on his tablet. Richard's calling it the Next Generation Initiative. He plans to formally announce Derek as president, Victoria as executive chair, and, he paused, your official removal from all company roles due to permanent incapacitation. Can he do that? Not if you're there to contest it. Marcus's fingers drummed on his briefcase. But Francis, if you show up, there's no going back. Richard will try to destroy you publicly. He'll claim you're mentally unfit, that the coma caused brain damage, that you're delusional. And if I don't show up? Then the narrative stands. You lose access to the $850 million trust. Derek inherits your mother's legacy, and every deal you've structured, every innovation you've created, becomes officially theirs forever. I thought about the nights I'd spent building financial models while Derek partied with clients, the proposals I'd written that he'd read verbatim to boards, the Shanghai deal that saved the company from bankruptcy, my strategy, his signature. There's more, James said quietly. 5 board members have been questioning Richard's leadership. They know something's off about the numbers Derek presents versus the actual performance. If you appear with proof of your contributions, they'll have to listen, Marcus finished. But Francis, this isn't just about money or recognition. If you do this, you're declaring war on your own family, in front of 2,000 witnesses. I looked at my mother's badge, feeling its weight in my palm. 72 hours to decide, disappear quietly with nothing, or fight publicly for everything. What would my mother do? Marcus smiled. She'd already be planning her entrance. Before you decide, Marcus's expression darkened. You need to understand what Richard will do if you fail. He opened another folder, this one filled with legal documents. Your father has already drafted a lawsuit, fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage. He's claiming you've been secretly siphoning money through unauthorized consulting contracts. But those contracts were legitimate. You know that. I know that. But without proof, it's your word against the CEO of a $2.8 billion company. Marcus pointed to a specific clause. If he wins, you don't just lose the inheritance. You face criminal charges, potential jail time, your professional reputation destroyed permanently. James Harrison leaned forward. Francis, I can vouch for your work with Goldman Sachs, but Richard has connections everywhere. Judges who golf at his club, prosecutors who depend on Colton Industries' political donations. If you walk into that boardroom and can't prove everything, he'll bury you. And there's more, Marcus added reluctantly. Victoria has been spreading rumors about your mental state for years. Depression after your mother's death, alleged substance abuse, even suggestions that the car accident wasn't really an accident. My stomach turned. She's saying I tried to. She's built a narrative where you're unstable, desperate, and dangerous. If you show up at that meeting, she'll have security ready to escort you out as a threat to safety, unless what? Unless you have irrefutable proof, documents they can't dispute, witnesses they can't discredit, and most importantly, you need to maintain absolute composure. One emotional outburst, one moment of weakness, and they'll use it as evidence of your instability. I thought about the last 15 years of swallowing insults, of smiling through humiliation, of being grateful for scraps. So I have 72 hours to prove I'm sane, competent, and worth $850 million. No, Marcus corrected. You have 72 hours to prove you always were. James Harrison pulled out his phone and showed me an email thread. The sender names made my eyes widen. 5 of Colton Industries' most influential board members. They've been asking questions for 2 years, he explained. How does Derek's division show 40% growth when he's never in the office? Why do all the breakthrough strategies come from consulting firms that no one can verify? And most importantly, why does Richard panic every time someone mentions Elizabeth Smith's name? Marcus added, Thomas Chen from the Audit Committee. He caught himself. Sorry, Thomas Mitchell from the Audit Committee has been particularly suspicious. He remembers your mother, Frances. He knows her analytical style. He sees it in every successful proposal, and he knows it's not coming from Derek. They're afraid to move against Richard openly, James continued. But if someone with legitimate standing challenged him, they'd support me? They'd listen, which is more than Richard expects. James pulled up another email. This is from Sarah Walsh, head of international operations. She wrote this after the Shanghai deal. Whoever actually structured this agreement is a genius. I know it wasn't Derek. He couldn't even pronounce the client's name correctly. Marcus handed me a USB drive. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence we've collected. But Francis, the most powerful proof is this. He showed me an email from my own corporate account, sent to James 5 years ago, outlining the complete restructuring plan that saved Goldman Sachs's merger. It was CC'd to a blind account that Marcus had maintained. Timestamp, 3:47 a.m. Same night Derek was photographed at a Vegas casino. Your digital footprint proves everything. When you worked, what you created, how you built nearly half this company's value while they pretended you didn't exist. We have the proof, James said simply. The question is, are you strong enough to use it? My phone rang at 6 p.m. Richard's name on the screen, the first time he'd called in 3 months. Francis. His voice was cold, businesslike. I heard you're awake. Hello, Dad. Let's not pretend, shall we? Papers rustled in the background. You need to sign the succession documents. Derek will take over your responsibilities. I've been in a coma for 3 months. And the company moved on, signed the papers. You stopped paying my medical bills. A pause. The company needs to allocate resources efficiently. The company? Or you? His tone sharpened. Sign the papers, Francis. Don't make this difficult. I need time to think. You have until Thursday morning. If those papers aren't signed, I'll have to explain your mental incapacity to the board. Would you prefer that? Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a graceful exit. Take it. And if I don't? Then you'll learn what it really means to be alone. No job, no references, no family. I'll make sure every firm in Boston knows you're unstable. Like you told them about Mom? Silence, then dangerously quiet. Your mother was sick. Her mind was perfect until the end. Sign the papers, Francis, or I'll show everyone exactly how much you take after her. The line went dead. Marcus, who'd been listening on speaker, shook his head. He just threatened you on a recorded line. He doesn't know it's recorded. No, Marcus smiled grimly. He doesn't know a lot of things, including the fact that 3 board members just confirmed they'll attend an emergency session if you call for one. I looked at my phone. 3 days to prepare for war against the man who raised me and abandoned me in the same breath. I need to get out of this hospital. Already arranged. You're being discharged tomorrow morning. Victoria arrived the next morning like a storm in designer heels, her lawyer trailing behind her. She didn't knock. Privilege had always been her preferred entrance. Francis, she said my name like it tasted bitter. You look conscious. Hello, Victoria? She set a folder on my bed, her perfume overwhelming the antiseptic hospital smell. Sign these. We'll give you a severance package, $50,000. More than generous, considering. Considering what? Considering you've been nothing but a drain on this family for 15 years. She examined her manicure. Do you know what Richard spent on your education, your housing, your mother's medical bills before she died? My mother had her own money. Victoria's laugh was sharp. Your mother had nothing but debt and delusions. Richard saved you both out of pity. I reached for my phone, subtly starting a recording. Is that what you tell people? It's the truth. You've been living off our charity, taking advantage of Richard's guilt, but that ends now. 15 years of working 18-hour days is taking advantage? What work? Victoria's voice rose. Sitting in that closet office, pretending to contribute? Derek does the real work. You're just overhead we no longer need. Her lawyer stepped forward. Mrs. Colton is offering a generous $50,000 for 15 years of building 40% of this company's value? Victoria's face flushed. You built nothing. You are nothing. Without this family, you'd be homeless. Without my strategies, this family would be bankrupt. Delusional, just like your mother. She leaned in close. Sign the papers, or I'll personally ensure you never work anywhere again. Marcus chose that moment to enter. Mrs. Colton, I'd be careful about making threats in a hospital. These places have excellent security cameras. Victoria straightened, recognizing him. Sterling, I should have known you'd interfere. I'm just protecting my client's interests, as her mother asked me to. Derek showed up an hour after Victoria left, casual in his golf attire. My half-brother had inherited Richard's height but not his discipline. At 30, he already showed signs of soft living. Hey, sis. He dropped into the visitor's chair like we were having coffee, not negotiating my erasure. Rough couple months, huh? You could say that. Look, I'll cut to the chase. He pulled out his phone, showing me a bank transfer screen. $5 million, cash, today. All you have to do is sign over your rights and disappear. $5 million? It's more than fair. You get to start fresh somewhere else. Maybe Europe? You always talked about Paris. When I was 12. Derek shrugged. Point is, you take the money, we all move on. No drama at the shareholders' meeting. No messy family disputes. And you become president. I already am, basically. This just makes it official. He leaned back, supremely confident. Come on, Francis. You were never really executive material. All that time in your little office, running spreadsheets, that's not leadership. What about the Shanghai deal? What about it? The one that saved the company. Who structured that? Derek laughed. The consulting team, obviously. I managed them brilliantly. What was the client's name? His smile faltered. Why does that matter? You presented the deal to the board. Surely you remember the client's name. This is ridiculous. Look, $5 million is my final offer. Take it or leave it. Marcus stepped forward from where he'd been standing by the window. Mr. Colton, are you attempting to bribe a shareholder before an official vote? Derek jumped up. Who the hell, Sterling? What are you doing here? Documenting everything, Marcus said calmly. Please continue. You were saying something about Francis not being executive material? Derek grabbed his phone. This conversation is over. Francis, you have until tomorrow, then the offer disappears. Like family loyalty? He paused at the door. Family? You were never really family, just ask Dad. After Derek left, I sat in silence for a full minute. 3 offers, 3 insults, 3 confirmations that I'd never been anything more than an inconvenience to them. Marcus waited, patient as always. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about Mom's funeral. I turned the platinum badge over in my hands. Richard gave a speech about partnership and legacy. Victoria stood there in a black dress that probably cost more than Mom's casket. Derek was 16, texting through the service. And you? I was 17, wondering why the woman who built everything was being buried like a footnote. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number I needed. Marcus, can you set up a secure conference call? With whom? Thomas Mitchell, Sarah Walsh, and the other board members James mentioned. It's time they heard the truth. Marcus smiled. And Richard? He wants war. He'll get one. I dialed another number. James? It's Francis. I need every email, every document, every piece of evidence ready for Thursday. And I need one more thing. Name it. A Wall Street Journal reporter who isn't afraid of Richard Colton. I know just the one. Catherine Brooks. She's been investigating irregular patterns in Colton Industries reporting for 2 years. Perfect. I stood up, steady for the first time since waking. Marcus, I need a suit for Thursday. Something that says I'm not the scared 17-year-old they buried with my mother. I know just the place. And Marcus? I held up the badge. Make sure security knows I'll be using this. I want to enter through the executive entrance. The one Richard thinks only he can access. With pleasure. They wanted me to disappear quietly, gratefully, worthlessly. But Thursday morning, in front of 2,000 witnesses, they'd learn what Elizabeth Smith's daughter was really worth. Has your family ever underestimated your worth? Drop a comment below. And if you want to see what happens when a greedy family faces off against $850 million worth of truth, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the climax that's coming. This story is about to take a turn that Richard Colton never saw coming. Tuesday morning, Marcus's law office felt like a war room. He led me to a vault I'd never seen before, hidden behind a bookshelf that looked purely decorative. Your mother set this up in 2008, he explained, entering a complex code. She said you'd know when to open it. Inside the safety deposit box sat 3 items: a thick manila envelope marked with the Massachusetts state seal, a photograph I'd never seen, and a letter in my mother's handwriting. The photograph stopped me cold. It showed my mother with 5 people in what looked like a signing ceremony. One of them was a younger Richard, looking uncomfortable. The others were the original investors in Colton Industries, all of whom had mysteriously sold their shares to Richard after Mom died. This is the original incorporation, Marcus confirmed, pulling out the sealed document. Massachusetts Corporation Certificate, MA 2019-78432. Your mother as majority shareholder, Richard as minority partner. Notarized, filed, and somehow removed from public records after her death. The letter was dated a week before she died. My dearest Francis, if you're reading this, Richard has shown his true nature. The documents in this box are your birthright. I built Colton Industries not for wealth, but to prove that brilliance doesn't need a pedigree. You have that brilliance. Use it wisely. The badge is your key. The trust is your weapon. But this certificate? This is your proof that you were never their charity case. You were always the heir. Love, Mom. Marcus pulled out the last item, a USB drive labeled Security Footage 2009-2024. What's this? Every major meeting where you presented strategies that Derek later claimed. Your mother had cameras installed that IT never knew about. She knew this day would come. I held the certificate. This changes everything. No, Marcus corrected. This proves everything. James Harrison arrived at Marcus's office with a laptop and a team of Goldman Sachs executives I recognized from years of secret video conferences. Francis, James opened the laptop. We've compiled everything. The screen filled with email threads dating back 5 years, each one meticulously documented, with headers intact and digital signatures verified. This one's my favorite, said Patricia Kumar, Goldman's chief strategy officer. December 2023. Derek presented his restructuring plan for our Asian merger. Except here's your email to us from 3 weeks earlier with the identical strategy, down to the comma placement. Another executive, David Park, pulled up a different thread. The Shanghai deal that saved Colton Industries? You sent us the framework 6 months before Derek even knew Shanghai existed. We have 43 emails between you and our team, all time-stamped between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Why those hours? Marcus asked. Because that's when Derek was reliably unconscious, I admitted. I could work without interruption. James clicked through more evidence. In 5 years, you've advised on deals worth $1.2 billion. Our board knows it. Several Fortune 500 CEOs know it. The only people who don't know it are sitting in the Colton boardroom. Until Thursday, Patricia added. James has already informed the Wall Street Journal that Goldman Sachs will be making a statement about our shadow consultant who's been driving Colton's growth. You'd do that? Francis, James said seriously, you've made us hundreds of millions. More importantly, you've never once tried to take credit or leverage it for personal gain. That kind of integrity is rare. David pulled up one final email. This is from Richard to our CEO last month, claiming Derek was the architect of our partnership. We're prepared to publicly correct that misconception. I looked at the screen. 5 years of 3 a.m. emails. Proof that while my family slept, I was building their empire. Marcus held up the platinum badge, its surface catching the light. This isn't just an access card. Your mother embedded something remarkable in it. He inserted it into a reader connected to his laptop. Immediately, screens filled with data I'd never seen before. Full administrative access to Colton Industries servers, he explained. Every email Richard ever sent, every deleted file, every hidden account. Your mother built a backdoor that's been waiting 15 years. Is this legal? Completely. She was majority shareholder and Chief Technology Security Officer, a title Richard forgot existed. She had legal authority to maintain oversight access, and that authority passed to you. I scrolled through the files. There it was, a folder labeled Succession Planning, dated the month before Mom died. Inside, hundreds of documents showing she'd been preparing to remove Richard as CEO. She knew? She suspected. Look at this. Marcus pulled up an email thread between Richard and Victoria from 2009, 6 months before Mom's diagnosis. They were already discussing life after Elizabeth. Another file caught my eye. Board minutes, confidential. The real ones, not the sanitized versions Derek presented. They showed 5 board members repeatedly questioning Derek's competency, only to be shut down by Richard. This is why Thomas Mitchell and the others are ready to listen, Marcus said. They've been documenting Richard's deception for years, but they needed someone with standing to act. And this? I pointed to a file labeled Executive Override Protocol. Your ace in the hole. With this badge, you can lock Richard out of his own office, freeze Derek's corporate accounts, and access the boardroom's presentation system. All legally, all within your mother's established security protocols. I held the badge up. She really did think of everything. No, Marcus smiled. She thought of you. There's a difference. Wednesday evening. Less than 12 hours until the shareholders' meeting. Catherine Brooks from the Wall Street Journal sat across from me in Marcus's conference room, her recorder running. 2,000 attendees, international media. And Richard Colton has no idea you're coming? He thinks I'm broken in a hospital bed deciding which insulting offer to take. The venue is the Ritz-Carlton Grand Ballroom, she continued. Richard's power base. He's held every major announcement there for 20 years. The staff, the security, even the AV team, they all answer to him. Or so he thinks, Marcus interjected, sliding a document across the table. The Ritz-Carlton's parent company is a Goldman Sachs client. James made a call. The AV team now has instructions to give Francis full access to the presentation system. Catherine made notes. The meeting starts at 10 a.m. Richard's Next Generation Initiative presentation is scheduled for 10:30. When will you make your entrance? 10:29, I said, just as he's about to take the stage. Through the main entrance? The executive entrance, the one only board members can access. I touched the badge. The one he doesn't know I can open. And your allies? 5 board members will be strategically seated. Thomas Mitchell near the front, Sarah Walsh by the international investors, the others scattered through the institutional shareholders. Catherine looked up from her notes. You realize this will be the corporate equivalent of a public execution? Richard spent 30 years building his reputation. He spent 30 years stealing my mother's legacy. Thursday, I'm taking it back. What about Derek and Victoria? They'll be on stage with Richard, part of his grand presentation. They won't even see me coming until I'm at the podium. Catherine smiled. This is going to be front-page news. Good, I said. My mother deserves nothing less. Thursday, 7 a.m. I stood before the mirror in Marcus's guest suite, adjusting the black Armani suit he'd had tailored overnight. My mother's pearl necklace, the only thing Richard hadn't tried to claim, rested against the crisp white shirt. You look like her, Marcus said from the doorway. Elizabeth wore the same outfit when she first pitched Colton Industries to investors. My phone buzzed with texts from allies. Thomas Mitchell. In position. Board members ready. Sarah Walsh. International investors briefed. They're intrigued. James Harrison. Goldman team in place. Catherine Brooks has front row press credentials. Another message, this one from Richard. Final chance. Sign the papers or face the consequences. I didn't reply. The drive to the Ritz-Carlton took 20 minutes. Boston's financial district was already buzzing with activity. Through the car window, I could see banners announcing Colton Industries' annual shareholders meeting, the next generation. Nervous? Marcus asked. No. I touched the badge in my pocket. For 15 years, I've been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every spreadsheet, every late night, every swallowed insult, it all leads here. James called as we pulled up to the service entrance. Richard's already inside. Full court press with investors. Derek's working the younger crowd. Victoria's charming the old money. They have no idea what's coming. Security? 5 guards at the main entrance, 2 at executive. All have been informed about your badge authorization. I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. 45 minutes until Richard's presentation. 44 minutes until I destroyed everything he'd built on lies. Francis, Marcus said as I stepped out of the car, your mother would be proud. She would be vindicated, I corrected. There's a difference. The executive entrance was 50 feet away. Beyond it, 2,000 people were about to witness the most expensive mistake of Richard Colton's life. The Ritz-Carlton lobby was a sea of expensive suits and calculated smiles. Through the glass doors, I could see the who's who of Boston's financial elite, all here for Richard's grand announcement. I stayed in the service corridor, watching through security monitors that Marcus had arranged access to. Richard stood at the center of it all, working the room with practiced charm. Victoria glided between groups of investors, her laugh carrying across the marble floors. Derek held court near the coffee station, surrounded by younger executives who hung on his every word about innovative leadership. Miss Colton? A security guard appeared beside me. Mr. Sterling said you'd need access to the executive entrance. Not yet, I'm waiting for the right moment. On the monitor, I watched Thomas Mitchell arrive, followed by Sarah Walsh. They didn't acknowledge each other, but both positioned themselves strategically in the lobby. Catherine Brooks was already inside, her press badge visible, her photographer ready. 9:45 a.m. Richard began moving toward the ballroom, his entourage following. I could see him checking his phone, probably wondering why I hadn't responded to his threat. Ma'am, the security guard said quietly, there's something you should know. Mr. Colton specifically instructed us to watch for you. He said you might try to disrupt the meeting. My heart skipped. And? But he forgot one thing. The guard smiled slightly. My daughter works in accounting. She knows who really saved the company during the Shanghai crisis. Your badge overrides his instructions anyway, but I wanted you to know, not everyone here is blind to the truth. 9:50 a.m. The lobby was emptying as attendees filed into the ballroom. Thank you, I told the guard. Ma'am, give him hell. I smiled, touching the badge in my pocket. 10 minutes until showtime. 10 minutes until Richard learned that abandoning me in that hospital was the beginning of his end. 10:25 a.m. The executive entrance loomed before me. Frosted glass doors that I'd never been allowed to pass through in 15 years of working at Colton Industries. I pulled out the platinum badge, my mother's final gift. The scanner beeped. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the locks disengaged with a decisive click. Invalid access attempt, a younger guard called out, rushing over. Ma'am, this entrance is restricted to... His supervisor, the one whose daughter worked in accounting, held up a hand. Check your system again, Johnson. The younger guard looked at his tablet, his eyes widening. Platinum override, executive level alpha. He looked up at me, confused. But only 3 people in the company have that level. Mr. Colton, the original founder, and... Elizabeth Smith, I said quietly. My mother. The supervisor opened the door wider. The boardroom access corridor is straight ahead, Miss Colton. Your authorization supersedes all other security protocols. I walked through the entrance I'd been barred from my entire adult life. The executive corridor was everything the regular entrance wasn't. Marble floors, original artwork, fresh orchids in crystal vases. This was the path of power, the route my mother had walked when she was building the empire Richard now claimed. Through the corridor's glass walls, I could see the ballroom, 2,000 attendees packed into their seats. Richard stood at the side of the stage, reviewing his notes one final time. Derek and Victoria were already seated on stage, smiling for the photographers. 10:28 a.m. Richard began walking toward the podium. Marcus's text came through. AV team ready. Your presentation is loaded. James Harrison. Goldman team in position. Catherine Brooks. Recording everything. 10:29 a.m. Richard reached the podium, his smile broad and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of Colton Industries. Time to introduce him to the past he'd tried to bury. Richard's voice filled the ballroom, smooth and commanding. Today marks a pivotal moment in Colton Industries' history. The Next Generation initiative isn't just about succession, it's about evolution. I stood in the wings, watching him work the crowd. He was good. I'd give him that. For 30 years, I've built this company from a small logistics firm into a $2.8 billion empire. He clicked his remote, and charts appeared on the massive screens. Charts I recognized, my analysis, my projections, with his name attached. But success isn't about the past, it's about the future, which is why I'm proud to announce that Derek Colton will assume the role of president, effective immediately. Polite applause. Derek stood, waving to the crowd with practiced humility. Victoria Colton, Richard continued, will serve as executive chair, bringing her decades of experience to guide our strategic vision. More applause. Victoria rose gracefully, every inch the corporate matriarch. Now, some of you have asked about other family members' roles in the company's future. Richard's tone shifted, became somber. It's with regret that I must address the situation with Francis Colton. My hand tightened on the badge. Due to recent medical complications resulting in significant cognitive impairment, Frances will no longer be able to continue in any capacity with Colton Industries. We wish her the best in her recovery and have made appropriate arrangements for her care. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Thomas Mitchell lean forward. Sarah Walsh exchanged glances with other board members. Richard raised his hand for silence. I know this is difficult news, but I assure you, the company's future has never been brighter. Derek and Victoria will... That's when I pushed open the boardroom door. The sound echoed through the ballroom. 2,000 heads turned. Richard's smile froze on his face. The walk to the stage felt both eternal and instant. 2,000 pairs of eyes tracked my movement through the ballroom. I heard gasps, whispers, the click of Catherine Brooks' photographer capturing every step. Francis? Richard's voice cracked through the microphone. You shouldn't be here. You're not well. I climbed the stage stairs with deliberate calm. Derek had half risen from his chair, his face cycling through confusion and alarm. Victoria gripped her armrest, her knuckles white against her red nails. Good morning, I said, approaching the podium. My voice carried without the microphone, clear and steady. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe the shareholders deserve to hear the truth before making any decisions about Colton Industries' future. Richard moved to block me. Security! I held up the platinum badge. The guards who had started forward stopped immediately. I have executive override authority, I announced, taking the microphone. Granted by Elizabeth Smith, majority shareholder and co-founder of Colton Industries. This is ridiculous, Richard hissed, but the microphone caught it, broadcasting his panic to everyone. I turned to face the audience. Thomas Mitchell was already standing. Sarah Walsh had her phone out, recording. James Harrison gave me the slightest nod. My name is Frances Colton, I said, daughter of Elizabeth Smith. For the past 15 years, I've been the architect behind 40% of this company's growth. Every major acquisition, every international expansion, every innovation that Derek Colton has presented to you originated at my desk in the converted supply closet I was given as an office. The murmur grew louder. Photographers pressed closer to the stage. And today, I continued, maintaining eye contact with the audience, I'm here to show you exactly what Richard Colton has been hiding. Marcus? The screens behind me flickered to life. The massive screens displayed the document that changed everything. Massachusetts Corporation Certificate, MA 2019-78432. This, I said, as gasps rippled through the ballroom, is the original incorporation document of Colton Industries. As you can see, Elizabeth Smith owned 65%. Richard Colton owned 35%. That's a forgery, Richard shouted, but his face had gone pale. Marcus stood up from his seat in the third row. I'm Marcus Sterling, senior partner at Sterling, Whitman and Associates. I can confirm this document's authenticity. I notarized it myself in 2001. The next slide appeared. My mother's will. The Elizabeth Smith Revocable Trust, I continued, valued at $850 million, was set to transfer to me under specific conditions. Those conditions were met 2 weeks ago when Richard Colton signed papers abandoning me during medical incapacity. I clicked to the next slide. Richard signed abandonment papers, his signature bold and unmistakable. You signed away more than my medical bills, Dad. You triggered the transfer clause. The crowd erupted. Board members were on their feet. Investors shouted questions. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. This is illegal, Victoria shrieked from her chair. She's mentally incompetent. Am I? I clicked again. The screen filled with emails, dozens of them, all time-stamped, all showing my work. These are my communications with Goldman Sachs over the past 5 years. Every strategy, every analysis, every deal that built this company's value. James Harrison stood. I can confirm that Frances Colton has been our shadow consultant for 5 years. Her strategies have generated over $1.2 billion in value for both our firms. Richard grabbed for the microphone. This is a coup! Security! Remove her! But security didn't move. They were looking at the screen, at the proof that the real power in Colton Industries had just revealed herself. James Harrison commanded the room the moment he stood. The CEO of Goldman Sachs didn't stand for just anyone. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice carried without a microphone, I've remained silent about Colton Industries' operations out of professional courtesy. That ends today. He walked toward the stage, every step deliberate. For 5 years, Frances Colton has been the strategic mind behind every major Colton Industries success. The Shanghai deal that saved this company from bankruptcy? Frances designed it from her apartment at 3 a.m., while Derek Colton was documented at a Las Vegas casino. Derek shot up from his chair. That's slander. It's fact. James pulled out his phone, projecting emails onto the screens. Here's Frances's proposal, sent to me 6 months before the deal was announced. Here's Derek's presentation to the board, word for word identical, except for the signature. Patricia Kumar from Goldman stood next. The European expansion that generated $400 million in revenue? Frances's framework, submitted to us while she was supposedly just supporting staff. Another Goldman executive rose. The AI integration that modernized your supply chain? Frances coded the initial algorithm herself. We have the GitHub commits. Thomas Mitchell finally spoke from the audience. As head of the audit committee, I've suspected this for years. The quality of work supposedly from Derek never matched his actual capabilities. Now we know why. Sarah Walsh added, the international team has been wondering who the real strategist was. Every successful expansion bore the same analytical signature, precise, innovative, ahead of market trends. That wasn't Derek. That was Frances. Richard's face had turned purple. This is conspiracy. You're all in on it. Yes, James said simply. We're all in on the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it, Mr. Colton? Fire Goldman Sachs? Alienate every board member who values competence over nepotism? The crowd was in chaos. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. Thomas Mitchell walked to the stage with 4 other board members. The crowd fell silent. When board members moved as a unit, corporate blood was about to spill. I call for an emergency board session, Thomas announced. Right here, right now. You can't do that, Richard protested. According to corporate bylaws, 5 board members can call an emergency session in the presence of shareholders. Thomas held up a document. We have 5. Actually, he looked around as 2 more board members stood. We have 7. Sarah Walsh took the microphone. I move for a vote of no confidence in Richard Colton as CEO. Seconded, said another board member. This is a coup, Richard shouted. No, Thomas said calmly. This is corporate governance. You've been lying to shareholders for 15 years, claiming credit for work done by someone you've systematically marginalized. That's fraud. Victoria tried to leave the stage, but cameras blocked every exit. Derek sat frozen, his face white as paper. All board members in favor of removing Richard Colton as CEO? Thomas asked. 7 hands rose immediately, then an 8th, a 9th. Within 30 seconds, 12 of the 15 board members had their hands up. Motion carried. The ballroom erupted. Investors were on their phones, undoubtedly calling their firms. The stock price was probably going crazy. I further move, Sarah Walsh continued, to nominate Francis Colton to the board of directors, effective immediately. Seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Richard stumbled backward. You can't. I built this company. No, I said quietly, but the microphone carried my words to every corner of the ballroom. My mother built this company. You just took credit for it. And now, finally, Elizabeth Smith's daughter is taking her rightful place. The applause started slowly, then built to thunder. 2,000 witnesses to the fall of Richard Colton and the rise of the heir he'd tried to bury. This is the moment karma finally caught up. If you're enjoying this story about justice and reversing fortune, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Comment, karma, if you think Richard deserved what's coming next. The aftermath is about to get even more interesting. Richard's composure shattered completely. He grabbed the podium, his knuckles white, addressing the crowd with desperate fury. This is illegal! She's manipulating you all! The accident! The coma! She's brain damaged! Mr. Colton, Catherine Brooks called out from the press section, are you claiming your daughter is mentally incompetent while she just presented detailed financial evidence and strategic analysis? She's being coached. Sterling put her up to this. Marcus stood again. Frances needs no coaching. Unlike Derek, she actually understands the business she's been running from the shadows. Richard spun toward the security guards. I'm ordering you to remove her. I sign your paychecks. The head of security stepped forward. Actually, Mr. Colton, the board signs our paychecks, and they just voted. Derek, Richard turned to his son. Tell them about your achievements, the Shanghai deal. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The consultants. What was the client's name? I asked quietly. Derek's silence was deafening. Mr. Chen of Harmony Logistics, I supplied. Excuse me, Mr. Smith of Harmony Logistics. We met 17 times via video conference. You met him 0 times because you were in Vegas. Victoria! Richard was grasping at straws now. You're still executive chair. Victoria stood slowly, her composure cracking. I need to speak with my lawyer. Your lawyer is right there. I pointed to the man who'd accompanied her to the hospital. Would you like to explain to everyone how you tried to bribe me with $50,000 to disappear? The lawyer quickly distanced himself from Victoria, literally stepping backward. Richard made one last desperate attempt. I'll sue. I'll destroy all of you. With what money? Thomas Mitchell asked. Your assets are tied to your position, a position you no longer hold. Richard Colton, the man who'd built an empire on my mother's bones, stood defeated on his own stage. I waited for the chaos to settle, then spoke with the same measured tone I'd learned during 15 years of swallowing insults. Richard, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for restoration. The room quieted, everyone leaning in. You have 2 choices. You can fight this, hire lawyers, drag the company through scandal, watch the stock price crater while you try to prove your lies were truth. Or you can accept a graceful transition. Graceful? He spat the word. You keep your shares. You retain an advisory role. You save face by announcing this was a planned succession that you orchestrated to test the company's readiness. I pulled out a prepared statement. Marcus has drawn up the terms. You can leave here as a strategic visionary who recognized his daughter's talents, or as a fraud who got caught. The room held its breath. The Shanghai deal saved this company, I continued. The European expansion doubled our revenue. The AI integration positioned us for the next decade. Those achievements stand, regardless of whose name is on them. What matters is the company Elizabeth Smith built continues to thrive. James Harrison spoke up. Goldman Sachs supports a smooth transition. The market responds better to planned succession than corporate coup. You have 5 minutes to decide, I said. After that, Catherine Brooks publishes her story with either narrative. Your choice, which one? Victoria grabbed Richard's arm. Take the deal. Derek nodded rapidly. Dad, please, take it. Richard looked around the room, at the board members who'd turned on him, the investors recording everything, the press poised to destroy him. You planned this, he said to me. No, I replied. Mom did, 15 years ago. I'm just executing her final strategy. For the first time in my life, I saw Richard Colton recognize he'd been outplayed. Thomas Mitchell returned to the microphone. We need to formalize this transition. I call for a vote on the proposed succession plan. The terms were projected on the screen. Richard Colton, transition to advisory chairman Francis Colton. Board of Directors, Strategic Development Chair. Derek Colton, reassignment to Regional Operations Manager. Victoria Colton, voluntary resignation with standard severance. Immediate audit of all historical transactions. Mr. Colton, Thomas addressed Richard, do you accept these terms? Richard stood silent for a long moment. The entire ballroom waited. Finally, Victoria whispered urgently in his ear, and he gave a single bitter nod. Let the record show Richard Colton accepts the transition, Thomas announced. All board members in favor? 15 hands rose, unanimous. Shareholders? Thomas asked the room. A show of support? The response was overwhelming. Nearly every hand in the room went up. The investors knew competence when they saw it, and they'd just witnessed 15 years of it revealed. Motion carried. Effective immediately, Francis Colton is elected to the board of directors. Marcus handed me the official documents. As I signed, I noticed my signature looked exactly like my mother's, something Richard probably never bothered to notice. Ms. Colton, Thomas said formally, would you like to address the shareholders? I returned to the podium one last time. Colton Industries was built on innovation, integrity, and intelligence. My mother embodied those values. For 15 years, they were buried under ego and deception. Today we return to our roots. I looked directly at Richard. The company will thrive. Your legacy, such as it is, remains intact, but the truth is now on record. The applause was different this time, not shocked or excited, but respectful, professional. This meeting is adjourned, Thomas announced. Just like that, in a boardroom Richard thought he owned, justice was served with a corporate vote and a signature. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Catherine Brooks's Wall Street Journal article went live with the headline, The Ghost CEO, How Francis Colton Built an Empire from a Supply Closet. Her photographer had captured the perfect moment. Me holding the incorporation document while Richard's face crumbled in the background. Bloomberg picked it up immediately. Colton Industries soars 15% after revealing hidden architect of success. CNBC ran a special segment, The $850 million Comeback, Abandoned Daughter Reclaims Corporate Legacy. My phone exploded with messages. CEOs I'd secretly advised for years finally able to acknowledge me publicly. Board members from other companies inquiring about my availability. Headhunters offering astronomical salaries to jump ship. Marcus fielded the media requests while I sat in what used to be Richard's office, now temporarily mine. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see news vans lined up outside. Forbes wants an exclusive, Marcus reported. Fortune is preparing a cover story. Harvard Business Review wants you to write a piece on shadow leadership. Later, I said, watching Richard's personal items being boxed up by maintenance. Right now, I need to stabilize the company. Thomas Mitchell knocked and entered. The board wants to discuss CEO succession. Your name is at the top of the list. I don't want to be CEO, I said, surprising him. I want to be Chief Strategy Officer. Let's hire a CEO who can execute while I design. That's what I do best. That's actually brilliant. Separating vision from operations. My phone buzzed with a Google alert. The story had gone international. Abandoned daughter's boardroom revenge was trending in 12 countries. But the best notification was from my bank. $850 million trust fund transfer complete. My mother's money, my mother's company. Finally, both were where they belonged. Victoria's resignation letter arrived within 2 hours, delivered by her lawyer who looked eager to distance himself from the whole situation. She'd negotiated a standard severance package, generous by normal standards, insulting compared to what she'd stolen in credit over the years. Derek's demotion was harder to watch. He sat across from me in the conference room, his usual swagger completely deflated. Regional Operations Manager, he read from the reassignment letter, reporting to the Senior VP of Logistics. It's a real job, I said. With real responsibilities you'll have to actually fulfill. I don't know how. Then learn, I did. You had talent, I just had Dad. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him. Derek, you're 30 years old. It's not too late to become competent at something. Take the job, work your way up legitimately. Will you help me? No, but I won't sabotage you either. Clean slate, real work, actual achievements. That's more than I got. He signed the papers. As he left, he paused at the door. The Shanghai deal. I really couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done any of it. I know. Everyone knows now. Yes. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. After he left, Marcus informed me that Victoria had already listed their Beacon Hill mansion for sale. Moving to Florida, apparently. Her sister lives there. Good. Distance helps. Derek's been enrolled in an executive education program at Wharton. He's actually attending classes. Maybe there's hope for him. And Richard? Richard made his choice. Advisory chairman is more than he deserves, but exactly what the market needs to see. The Colton family empire had been restructured in a single morning. Victoria in exile, Derek demoted to reality, and Richard reduced to a figurehead in the company he'd claimed to build. The email arrived 3 days later, at 2 a.m. Richard always did his real thinking in the dark hours. Francis, I failed you as a father. I see that now. Your mother would be ashamed of what I became after she died. Elizabeth built everything. I know that, always knew it. But admitting it meant admitting I was nothing without her. You have her genius. I couldn't bear to see it, to need it, to depend on it the way I depended on her. So I diminished you, used you, told myself it was business. It wasn't business. It was cowardice. I don't expect forgiveness. I expect nothing. But you deserve the truth, even if it comes 15 years too late. The company is yours. It always was. Richard. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Marcus with a note. Save this for the lawyers, just in case. There would be no reply, no reconciliation scene, no tearful reunion. Some bridges, once burned, left only architectural lessons about how not to build. But I did make one concession. The next day, I had his advisory chairman office restored, not the CEO suite, but a respectable space with a view. His nameplate read, R. Colton, Founder Emeritus. Technically true, emotionally hollow. Thomas Mitchell questioned the gesture. Why give him anything? Because cruelty is his pattern, not mine. He gets an office, a title, and a daily reminder that the building he sits in was built by the woman he tried to erase and is now run by the daughter he abandoned. That's either very generous or very calculated. It's what my mother would have done, professional to the end. Richard's apology email remained unread in my inbox for weeks. Some words came too late to matter, no matter how true they finally were. Within 6 months, Colton Industries looked nothing like the company Richard had ruled through fear and favoritism. The first change was healthcare. I instituted unlimited medical leave for all employees. No one would ever be abandoned in a hospital bed on my watch. The policy cost millions. The employee loyalty it bought was priceless. Next came transparency. Every department head now presented their own work. No more stolen credit, no more shadow contributions. A junior analyst who'd been doing her boss's work for 3 years got promoted on the spot when the truth came out. The Elizabeth Smith Innovation Foundation launched with $50 million in funding, supporting female entrepreneurs in STEM fields. My mother's name was finally attached to something worthy of her legacy. The supply closet that had been my office for 15 years was converted into a memorial space. A plaque read, "From this 6x8 room, Francis Colton built 40% of this company's value. Never underestimate anyone based on the size of their office." Marcus helped establish new corporate governance rules. Family members could work at the company, but had to meet the same performance standards as any employee. Nepotism died a regulatory death. The stock price hit record highs. Turns out investors preferred competence to charisma. "You've changed everything," Thomas Mitchell said during a board meeting. "No, I've restored everything. This is the company my mother envisioned, built on merit, not birthright." The Shanghai clients I'd worked with for years finally met me in person. Mr. Smith, formerly Mr. Chen in my mind, laughed when he learned the truth. We always wondered why Derek seemed so brilliant on email and so confused on calls. By year's end, Harvard Business School was teaching a case study. The Colton Revelation, Hidden Leadership and Corporate Truth. My mother's company finally reflected her values. It only took 15 years and one abandoned hospital room to get there. 1 year later, I stood in my new office, not the CEO suite, but the Chief Strategy Officer space I designed myself. Floor-to-ceiling windows, yes, but also workstations for collaboration, whiteboards covering entire walls, and a small corner dedicated to my mother's memory. The company ran like clockwork under our new CEO, someone I'd personally recruited from Microsoft. I did what I did best: strategy, innovation, building the future, while she handled operations and execution. Perfect symbiosis. My days started at 7 a.m. now, not 3 a.m. I ate lunch in the executive dining room, not at my desk. I attended board meetings as a voting member, not as invisible support staff. "Family dinner this Sunday?" Derek texted. He'd been promoted to regional manager after completing his Wharton program and actually earning it. "I'll be there," I replied. These dinners happened monthly now, Richard, Derek, and me. Not playing happy family, but maintaining professional civility. Victoria never attended. Florida suited her better. Richard had aged 10 years in one. He spoke less, observed more, and occasionally offered actually useful advice from his advisory role. He never mentioned the past. Neither did I. "The board wants to discuss succession planning," Thomas Mitchell mentioned during our quarterly review. "You're 33. In 7 years, you could be CEO." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll start my own company. Mom's trust gives me options." "What would Elizabeth want?" I smiled. "She'd want me to choose for myself. That's the difference between her and Richard. She built an empire but raised a daughter. He tried to own both." My phone buzzed with a text from James Harrison. "Goldman has a new project. Interested?" I responded. "Send details. My team will review." My team, my choice, my life. Finally, the Harvard Business Review piece I finally wrote was titled "The Cost of Invisible Excellence." It opened with a simple truth. Your worth doesn't diminish because others refuse to see it, but their blindness shouldn't determine your paycheck. 3 lessons emerged from my story, lessons I now shared with young professionals who reached out daily. First, document everything. Every email, every contribution, every late-night breakthrough. Not for revenge, but for reality. My mother knew this. She built an evidence trail that survived 15 years and her own death. Your work should have your fingerprints on it, even if someone else takes the bow. Second, build alliances outside the toxic system. James Harrison and Goldman Sachs knew my value when my own family didn't. Thomas Mitchell suspected the truth and waited for the right moment to act. Marcus Sterling protected my interests when I couldn't protect myself. Your allies don't always share your blood or your building. Third, patience isn't passive. For 15 years, I wasn't waiting, I was building. Every skill learned, every relationship forged, every piece of evidence gathered was a brick in the foundation of my eventual freedom. Richard thought my silence meant submission. It meant preparation. Do you regret not acting sooner? A young woman asked at a conference. No. At 20, I would have been too angry. At 25, too desperate. At 32, I was precise. Timing isn't about the clock, it's about readiness. The most important lesson? Power isn't inherited or granted. It's built, deal by deal, decision by decision, often in rooms where you're not supposed to be. My mother knew this. She built an empire while letting Richard wear the crown, but she made sure the real power would transfer to someone who'd earned it in the shadows. Her daughter. Me. The last conversation that mattered happened on a Thursday, 18 months after the shareholder meeting. Richard requested a private meeting, not in his advisory office, but in mine. I need to know, he said, looking older than his 60 years. Did you ever consider just walking away? Taking the $5 million from Derek and disappearing? Every day for 15 years. But you didn't. Mom wouldn't have. He nodded slowly. Elizabeth always played the long game. This wasn't a game. It was my life. I know that now. We sat in silence that wasn't quite comfortable, but was no longer hostile. I won't apologize again, he said. You wouldn't believe it anyway. I wouldn't. But I will say this. The company is better with you visible than you ever were invisible. That's the closest to truth you've spoken in 15 years. He stood to leave, then paused. The family dinners. We don't have to continue them. No, we don't. But we will. Once a month, 2 hours, professional courtesy. That's the boundary. Why any contact at all? Because hatred takes energy, I'd rather invest elsewhere. Because Derek is trying to become better. Because maintaining professional relationships is what adults do. And Victoria? Victoria made her choice. Distance is her boundary and mine. Richard nodded. Boundaries. Elizabeth would approve. She would. After he left, I looked at the photo on my desk. My mother at 32, my current age, standing in front of the original Colton Industries building. She was smiling, but her eyes held the same steel I now saw in my own reflection. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges with gates, and I held the keys. The story could have ended with revenge. Instead, it ended with something better. Balance. Thank you for watching my story. If you or someone you know is struggling with toxic family dynamics, remember, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. Please subscribe for more stories about resilience and justice. Comment below. What did you learn from this story? And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply claiming what was always rightfully yours.